Super. En horen jullie mij ook? Yes. Ja, Sophia. Super. Ik zoek zo meteen nog net een ander plekje met niet zoveel achtergrondlicht, dus dat komt helemaal goed.
Zeker. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome very much in this webinar on VR and medical device regulations. In our project VR for Rehab, we came across to a lot of problems and issues in these legal contexts. So we thought it might be a good idea to share what we found with you. And the fun thing in this webinar is that you can ask anything you like to know about virtual reality and the medical device directive. We have this afternoon 3 magnificent speakers for you. One business developer connected to the Games for Health organization. We have a lawyer and we have an entrepreneur, but I'll come to that later. Before we start, I would like to invite all of you to come to our annual conference on the 23rd and the 24th of June, the VR for Rehab conference, and you can find more about the program and how you can send in your abstract on vrforrehab.org. But now I would like to introduce René Luigjes. He's Manager Business Development from the Games for Health organization, and he will tell you a little bit more on how medical device regulations fits into his business development practice. Ladies and gentlemen, René Luigjes.
Thank you, Remco, for this nice introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I get some signals now. People can't see, but it's always laughing in the studio. You know, you get signals from the people managing everything. Okay, it's about more about the game sector which we're in at Games for Health, and some ideas and tips and tricks, and also some fun about what the MDR could do for and means for the game business. You know that in virtual reality there's a lot of games embedded in it, so there's definitely a relation with virtual reality, though I will not talk too much about virtual reality. It's about 100 years ago and it was exactly in 1928 that Alexander Fleming invented the penicillin, an interesting drug. But can you imagine what would have happened if he lived in 2021? Obviously, because of the amount of side effects, he would never have passed the EMA approval. And because there were too many side effects, and the effect as such was not definitely that much proved in placebo-controlled trials, that he would never have been successful, unless there might have been a tremendous pandemic, infectious diseases situation like the recent corona. What if this was designed in 2021? And this is Remission. And Remission is a game, is a video game which is designed to improve adherence for chemotherapy for children. And it was actually, the game was designed in 2008, about 2008. And it proved that the adherence improved. And as a result of the improved adherence, by playing the game, the children were cured. But if there was an MDR, they would probably never pass the MDR, or might have to spend a fortune to get the approval. It's documented, the effect is documented, it's published in Pediatrics, and as I mentioned, the result was a reduced number of, or reduction of the people. Oh, no, sorry, correct me. It was an increased number of children who were cured with cancer. It's proven in a control trial. One group got the video games and without remission, and the other group got the video games with remission. So another example of a situation and a design which would have been in major trouble if the MDR was already in place. A bit about the MDR. What you here see is a tremendous nice schedule. It's in English, it's in Dutch available, it's in French available, it's in more or less any language available, which is a flow chart which you can use to define whether your software, we're talking about software, games with software, which you can use to see what the effect is of the MDR on the software. You have to follow this flow chart, and you have to really answer all questions very honestly, otherwise you may end up in a mess. It's available on the internet, everybody can use it, and it's the first guideline which may help you to decide how to proceed. The crucial issue is always that you have to answer, and I'm moving too fast, sorry, that you have to answer what the intended use is, so what the purpose is of the game and the software you're going to use. If you come out with a not class 1, and the class 1 is a self-declaration of the MDR, which is rather easy to be done. If it's not class 1, you end up in a class 2A or 2B. And as you can see, on this diagram, there are several criteria. It's what is the risk? It's critical, it's serious, or it's other. And what is the significance of the information which is included in the design? The last one, the informed treatment, is information which is used to make clinical decisions. And as you can see, about 70% of the designed applications are class 2A, about 30% is class 2B, or even the left one on the top, class 3. What the impact is anyway is that it will cost you a fortune. And the question is whether you want that. There's of course, I mentioned now some examples of design games, and if we take the number of games and applications which already are in the market, actually were already last year in May 2021 in the market, then there was a research done by the by the National Institute for Health and the Environment, for the Dutch RIVM, and you can see that only out of the 271 applications, there were only 21% which were a medical device. The other, the 79, so approximately 80%, was not a medical device. So altogether, it is not too bad. What to do? What about new games? That's because I assume that the audience is mostly interested in what to do if we are going to design a game. Well, the first question, I already mentioned that, is that you need to answer what the intended purpose is. What do you want? Do you want it to be a software under the medical device regulations or not? It's up to you, actually. So if you don't want it, then the question is, how can I avoid to come under the medical device regulation? There, I'll give later on some examples on that. The next question is, of course, can I afford the medical device regulation? Do I have enough money? Do I have investors? All questions to be answered. And then there is, what options are there? Are there alternatives? Either to avoid it or to find money. That's essential, actually. All these 4 questions are essential to be addressed by yourself or by your organization before you start in the design process. Because keep in mind that you have to make the decision before you decide designing, because in the process of design you already have to think about what you need to document for the MDR. Okay, some fun examples. Pokemon Go. Is that an MDR or not an MDR device? The purpose of this example is that you have to catch monsters. It's, by the way, a very well-designed game, because this game is one of the few where the motivation is catching monsters, while the objective is to get people on the move, to get them in activity. The effect of Pokemon was indeed more physical activity. If we take physical activity in the clinical environment, we know that it contributes to the prevention of coronary heart diseases, cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, obesity, etc., which is a derivative of physical activities. So actually, the purpose of Pokemon Go is prevention. It's not only MDR class 2A. So there, the purpose actually was to get people on the move, to improve their health, while the game, its own purpose was catching monsters. A nice trick to avoid the MDR. While Pokemon was designed, the MDR was not even yet in place. Another example is Tie Together. It's one of our own kitchen products. It was, by the way, the first Dutch Nintendo Switch game. And the purpose of this game is team building and the socialization of youngsters. The effect of this game is more and improved communications between youngsters. Instead of sitting still and drinking and eating chips on the couch, they start to play a game and activate and start talking with each other. The side effect was actually that the improvement of communications also could be applied to children with autism. So actually, this game is a tool to treat autism, while the objective and the purpose of the game was totally different. Right, some tips which are experiences from, as mentioned, our own kitchen again. And there was an idea from a obstetrician from a Dutch hospital who said there's a problem with couples who want to have children, have a children wish, and we want to help them with their lifestyle. Very tricky, very close to the MDR, and because it is all right a lifestyle intervention, but it's not a treatment. So to avoid any risk in running into problems, being a rather small design company and not being able to spend all the money for the MDR, we found a sponsor, which is one of the tricks you can do. If you are not sure that you have the money, if you can't afford it, or if you want support, because some companies, like pharmaceutical companies, have a major experience, find a sponsor. The effect was a lot of fun, actually, and the most interesting thing is that the first couple who used My Verticoach got pregnant. So that's an N-1 study, but it was a significant effect, actually. Another example is Healthy Bones. It's an app which is intended for elderly women after the menopause who broke their hip and who want to avoid its prevention, so that the orthopedic surgeon wants to avoid that they will break the hip again. Another one which could fit under the MDR, which did fit under the MDR, but it was a design, again a small design, with major cost. You have to realize that these are rather small games, small designs with major cost. So there is a disbalance. So the solution there was to find a partner who could embed the application into a portal. And the portal was approved, and the portal also got paid by the healthcare insurance. So in that way, you could find a partner and save a lot of money and share some of the cost. Ready. There's another example, and that is an example which is a rather successful one. That is a game which is designed to treat ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. The intention and the purpose already of an endeavor was to design the game for this purpose. And here you see what this effect can be. Last year, the FDA approved this game as the first game in digital therapeutics to improve attention function in children with ADHD. So the success, the investment was at worst. It got FDA approved, and on a large scale, it will be used now, probably globally. The trials were rather costly as well. There were 7 trials needed to prove the effect. 7 trials with a couple of 100 children, and it was of course a major investment. But the outcome eventually was that, and that's a dream, could be a dream of all, that they went public and got a significant amount of money. We could say a multi-million money. They were acquired, and that was a success. So here you see that the investment was pretty well returned. Okay, to wrap up, it all seems a labyrinth. You know, it's a lot of rules, it's a lot of regulations, and you start somewhere, but you don't know exactly where it will end. Like in a labyrinth, there are lots of hurdles to be taken, but above all, don't panic. There are always ways, solutions. There are all which I showed you a couple of, and which can help you to get and to achieve what you want to achieve. And if you want to have some guidelines, of course, there is literature. The graphs, the flowcharts I showed you were from a reference which you can read here under. I can't read it from this distance, actually. It's Shio.io. It's an ebook which is very helpful, and which gives you also, as I mentioned, the flow diagrams to help you go. There's another ebook which is based on an initiative of the Task Force Healthcare in the Netherlands, and which I would also recommend. And I would say that if we're not speaking also on behalf of the VR for Rehab project, if you want to learn more about design, and particularly one of the first chapters addresses the purpose of what you're going to design, make sure, and that's the purpose you design, is based on a moonshot. So make a moonshot, a proper moonshot, know what you want, what the purpose will be. So with that, you can read it in the book. Also, if you want to invest, then you have to make a proper business plan. That's also written in this book, which is a digital book which can be downloaded on the website there. Well, thank you for your attention. Good luck, and be creative. I have to stop now because there's somebody next to me who wants to chair the table.
Okay.
Remco.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, René, for this clear presentation. In the chat, we saw some questions about the quality of the figures of the images. We will share all the presentations in PDF with you, so you can all read it back. We shall also the download links to the literature references that René gave. Please download this blueprint from the VR for Rehab project. It's fun and it's for free. And the total recordings of the webinar will be on our website. I think early next week. Then it will be there for sure. Hopefully a little bit earlier. René, as a business developer, you have to deal with the medical device regulations, and as you clearly explained, it all has to do with intended use. But just to give me an idea, what are we talking about if your intention is medical? How much money, because you had used piles of money, how much money do I need to spend on medical device lawyers before I can get started?
Well, actually, you should ask Erik next one. How
No, I won't.
expensive it is.
I ask you as a businessman.
It depends on the complexity of the design, of course. It's
Uh-huh.
a rather simple design. You're easily 10, 20,000 euros, which
Uh-huh.
is quite a lot
Sure.
to that investment to get it returned.
Uh-huh.
If you talk about complex ones, you're easily end up to 100,000 euros or more.
Okay.
So that's
How much?
better.
What's the most money you've ever spent?
We didn't spend any
Okay, you did.
because I showed you the solutions.
No, but the others, your partners or paid that amount.
Yeah, I can't tell you how much Ferring spent.
No.
on
All
this.
right.
But
All right.
yeah, no, that's and you know the game industry is of course built out of many small companies who cannot afford it,
Yeah.
but do have some brilliant ideas,
Uh-huh.
and that's the problem with the MDR. It's although the if we take the numbers from the RIVM, you see that there was a shakeout expected, but there is no shakeout.
Okay.
There's just a couple dropping out.
Okay. Well, we get to talk to you later. Thank you very much. And we have to. So, if you have any questions for René, please note them in the comments, and I'll ask them later on after the presentation of Erik. We have a chit chat with both Erik and René. And so, if you have any questions, we go there. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay. Well, next up is a lawyer, one of the expensive lawyers René mentioned earlier, but a specialized lawyer in let's say medical device regulation and especially e-health. So it's my profound pleasure to announce to you Erik Vollebrecht. Hello. Erik, welcome. And please guide us through the current regulations and help us find our way and what law applies.
Okay, thanks very much. Well, here's the expensive lawyer. Maybe I should correct some things about lawyers right from the start. And that is, of course, what I see as a lawyer, typically in cases which involve medical app going through medical software going through a CE marking process, is that actually lawyers are the least of your problem. Actually, I see the most money being wasted, you could say, on companies not beginning the process with the end in mind. I think that's actually the most important tip that I can give you. And beginning with the end in mind doesn't only mean understanding the rules, but also understanding what you need to do to comply with the rules. And if you know what you should do to comply with the rules, oops, my remote is falling apart, then of course you have a lot less money to spend on people like me, because we don't have to course correct you halfway. And it's specifically the kind of course corrections that companies need to make halfway that end up costing them a lot of money. Typical case in point that I almost always see happening is companies that start to design software. Then they decide it's going to be medical software. Then they figure out that actually for medical software, you need a specifically documented design process in order for the software to comply with the rules. Then they figure out that they've been doing a kind of undocumented software documentation all along. And then they have to retrace their steps all the way, because they need to actually reverse engineer the design documentation that they should have started with from the start. So best tip I can give you is begin with the end in mind. Don't rush into things. Just a bit, very briefly about myself. I'm a lawyer coming from a specialized law firm. We do a lot with medical devices and medical devices software. Currently, for example, we do a lot of work on the draft AI regulation that's currently in the process, especially if you are developing VR games or games that have another AI component in there. This is definitely something to watch, apart from the MDR. Another element that wasn't really discussed, but which is also very, very relevant, is of course processing of personal data, because as soon as you run any software not fully locally in a particular place, then you'll probably be sending personal data concerning health here and there, which is a general data protection regulation issue. So lots of other things to also look out for. Oh, sorry. What's happening? Here we go. Optical connection, sorry. So, to make some starting points about virtual reality and the MDR, so far the only mentioning of a regulation we've heard is the MDR, the Medical Devices Regulation, which is correct in a way, because the Medical Devices Regulation covers most medical software. But it is not inconceivable that if you are applying virtual reality in the medical space, that you would, for example, be dealing with the in vitro diagnostic regulation as well, if it's used in a particular testing setting. For example, if you would use virtual reality in the process of analysis of data coming from an in vitro diagnostic instrument. So let's say, for example, you want to have a virtual tour in a visualization in VR of somebody's DNA in order to determine the best elements to do a CRISPR-Cas modification on, then typically that kind of software would be under the in vitro diagnostics regulation. Process of the law is more or less the same. And what I also am going to try and do is to make the MDR and the IVDR sound a little bit less as the Department of No as it was made out to be in the previous presentation, because just like with medicines, for example, there are rules for things. I often see with software clients, especially startups, that they say, yeah, but why do we have to comply to all this complex stuff? Well, I mean, if you build an MRI, for example, or you build, I don't know, a radiotherapy device that is controlled by software, people understand perfectly well that if the control software doesn't function correctly, then you can burn a hole right through a patient. So actually, software does something. And even with software in a VR setting, for example, let's say you have a software application for rehab. If your software consistently teaches a patient, for example, a wrong rehabilitation movement, you might actually exacerbate their damage rather than ameliorate it. And this is precisely why the MDR has all these rules. Often I think it's a very important, let's say, thought experiment. It's what I often ask clients to do. Replace software in your argument by medicine, and then still look at it if you still think it's ethical. Like, for example, it's ridiculous, it costs too much money to test this medicine before we try it on actual people. Well, that sounds a lot less ethical than, say, we will not test this software on actual people, for example. So this often also shows that the arguments are sometimes a bit self-serving as well. René just talked about intended purpose, and intended purpose is really important because it determines whether your software is in scope of the MDR or the IVDR. And the example that René gave about Pokemon Go, for example, is a really nice one because you can play Pokemon Go for fun. I've done that myself for years. I've kicked many happy ass in the gym behind my house, for example. Developed some really nice Pokemons. If it's for fun purely, then it's not a medical device. But if you start combining for fun and for therapeutic effect, as René showed with Pokemon Go, then it is important that then you start to go into the scope of the medical device regulation, because if it's got a medical purpose, then it's a medical device. If it's for clinical training, there's a lot of VR software available for clinical training, like, for example, for learning surgery techniques, for example, some really fantastic software for that. also not a medical device because it's for training. But if you would use the same software, the exact same software, for example, for surgical training, and you would use it for remote operation, like in Australia, for example, they experiment a lot with that, then suddenly the software, again, is used for a medical purpose in the treatment of a patient. So then it is a medical device. Then we come to an element that is quite difficult to grasp for companies often and for people. If software is to be used for providing information that is going to be used for treatment or diagnosis, then it is a medical device. And this is often quite difficult for people to grasp because people will say to me, yes, but Eric, we have this software and the software does not give a direct diagnosis or it does not do anything directly. Like, for example, tell the radiotherapy device where to direct the radiotherapy beam. No, it just gives a risk score or it just gives a number or it just makes an interpretation, but it doesn't say it's this or that. So how can it be a medical device? Because there's always a physician interpreting the results from the software. So how can this be a medical device? There is a learned intermediate, if you will. Well, the problem there is that, again, I think it's an understandable argument, but not a very good one. Because I always take them through the thermometer thought experiment. So I have a thermometer, and then I look at the thermometer, and the thermometer says 42. Doesn't say, Eric, your brain is melting, because that's probably what would be happening by, I think, 42 degrees Celsius. I mean, is there a doctor in the room? 42 degrees, then your proteins in your brain start falling apart. But anyway, it's so high, it's dangerous. But nobody would say that a thermometer in this setting is not a medical device because the measurement is there. It says 42, which is also the meaning of life, by the way. But also that needs to be interpreted. You need somebody to say 42, that's really risky. Same thing with software. So if your software says something that is meaningful to a healthcare professional for the purposes of therapy or diagnosis, it is always a medical device. You can also take it a bit more complex. You can say, for example, how about an ECG monitor that says beep? Well, you can say that's not a diagnosis. No, it's not a diagnosis, but everybody knows what it means. And again, this is giving information for diagnosis, so that makes it a medical device. Then there is another category that is very important. Actually, today I was having an emergency conference call this morning to solve a very hairy problem of a big company that they had with software that drives or influences the use of a medical device. So let's say, because that is a so-called accessory. And an accessory to a medical device does not need to have its own medical purpose, but it can still be regulated under the medical devices regulation as an accessory. So you still have to go through all the requirements. A typical example of an accessory is software that drives or influences the use of a medical device. So I try to come up with a virtual reality application of that, which typically is, for example, a VR app to control navigation of a medical device in the body. So let's say, for example, we've got a swarm of nanobots, which is injected into me. And then there's a nice virtual reality app, a bit like the interface in, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Inner Space, the old one from 1985, I think, with Dennis Quaid, where he goes into the human body in this little submarine. Fantastic movie. Absolute masterpiece of animatronics, really beautiful movie. But let's say, for example, I would have a little submarine like that, and I would control it by virtual reality app with a thing like this, for example, then that would typically be an accessory to the medical device of that little submarine. that goes into the body, drills holes in things, poses cameras somewhere, all that nice stuff. I should hurry up a bit because I think I'm already taking, way too much time. Sorry. 12 more minutes. Oh, shit. Okay. I'm falling in my normal trap of talking way too much. My apologies. So I will speed it up a bit. VR apps are software, so that's easy. And there's a lot of good official guidance for software available by now by the Medical Devices Coordination Group, which is responsible for the medical devices regulation and in vitro diagnostics regulation. So, for example, there is a document, MDCG 2020-1 on clinical evaluation of software and performance evaluation of software. This is a crucial document if you are going to make medical apps. So important because it guides you through the whole process, how to support the medical intended purpose with data, with clinical data, how to port this to a relevant argumentation in your technical file, and in the end, how to get this to a full technical file that is going to be approved by the notified body in the end. Because under the MDR, most software will need to go through notified body review, a third party, except the fertility app that Renee showed. That's actually the only known example that I know that is still a class 1 device under the MDR. So good for the people with fertility apps because of the expanded definition of medical device under the MDR. This is also included in the scope of the MDR. Under the old directive, we only had contraceptives that were in scope of the medical devices directive, but now we also have proceptives, which are in scope of the MDR as a medical device. Other relevant guidance is the guidance on qualification and classification of software. Renee showed the flowcharts for classification of software. Very important because the classification of software defines the conformity assessment procedure that you have to go through. And this guidance document helps you to qualify, is it software or not, and to classify which risk class is it in. Very important. Then there is another quite important document, MDCG 2019-16 on cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is very important too, because the last thing you want is people from places that where they take personal data a bit less seriously, or where they like to install ransomware on your computer to actually get into your software and upset things. So cybersecurity requirements as well. And the MDR actually has a little chapter on what they call general safety and performance requirements for software. We'll talk a bit about that later. Then, of course, there's other more general medical devices guidance that is also relevant to software. So like I said, it all starts with the intended purpose. The intended purpose is, okay, so what is this software supposed to do in terms of clinical benefit? And this is actually the whole process that you need to go through. This is basically the MDCG 2020-1 process. So you have to look at what is the clinical benefit of the software. So for example, for Pokemon Go, is that catch monsters? In that case, it's for fun. Is it get the patient off his lazy butt and make him move around more? Then you could say, well, it's lifestyle. And if you would say no, but it's actually, this is to make sure that patients avoid getting medical problems like thrombosis, which are associated with sedentary lifestyle, then you have a medical purpose and you could go for a medical device classification. So what you need to do if you go through the clinical evaluation process, and this is where things get complicated, and this is also where I always advise you to begin with the end in mind, is the MDR says you yourself have to specify and justify the level of clinical evidence needed to support the intended purpose of the device. Well, that sounds a bit like Gandalf saying something in Lord of the Rings, but in the end, it's very logical. It's basically Spider-Man's uncle argumentation. If you say your software does something, then you need data to back it up. And as René has shown in the presentation just now, for example, you may have data in peer-reviewed publications in medical journals, which could be a very good basis for data. And how much data do you need? How much data is enough? Well, it depends on the characteristics of the device. What data is sufficient to actually support these performance characteristics. Now, these are some nice examples of specifically VR apps that I could find that have claimed clinical benefits. Like, for example, pain reduction, typical medical clinical benefit. Physical therapy, we are at the VR for rehab here after all, so that's also a clinical benefit. And there's another clinical benefit there with pain reduction. So, very evident. I am nearing the end already of my time, so I'm going to show you these slides to show actually that's less complicated than you think. It's also less threatening than you think. Why? Because there's a lot of good guidance. For example, this comes right from the software clinical evaluation guidance, showing you a clear flowchart on how you should generate your clinical evidence. I mean, how difficult could it be? You follow the flowchart, and in the end, you arrive at a good result. And why do you generate the data? In order to show that the device complies with all the general safety and performance requirements of the MDR. So what do you look at actually? Here are some combinations of software that that you can have. Like, for example, I've mentioned the that's on the lower row, software driving or influencing the use of a medical device. Then the column on the right shows the focal point of your clinical evaluation. So this is, again, think it's difficult? No, it's not at all difficult. Look at the process. There's a very good process. So planning, begin with the end in mind, go for the data, appraise the data, analyze the data, document the data. It's actually not that difficult as long as you work procedurally. You work procedurally in order to meet the general safety and performance requirements of the MDR. I've mentioned several here that are relevant to software. Just from the top of my head, these were the relevant ones. I want to mention one more really important clause in the MDR and the IVDR here, because I've seen in the attendee list that there are a lot of health institutions present in the audience. Actually, we are broadcasting from a health institution as we speak. Now, the MDR and the IVDR actually have made a very convenient exemption for health institutions to the whole CE marking process. Article 5, Section 5 of both of these regulations says, hey, are you a health institution and do you make in-house software for your own patient population? Then good for you. You don't have to go through the whole expensive CE marking process. Actually, you can do this all by yourself. It may be that at some point the competent authority might show up and look retrospectively if you've done it all correctly, but there is a specific exemption for in-house produced software, which is very important because I've seen a lot of the very niche rehabilitation software and also a lot of the newer virtual reality software that is all produced within in hospitals. So as long as you are not commercializing it, then it is a very appropriate framework to use. When you are on the market with your software or when you've started to deploy it in the clinic under the exemption, Then you need to do post-market clinical follow-up, or if it's an IVD, post-market performance follow-up. Again, very clear process for this. Basically, you need to look at how your software is performing in the real world, collect that data, and check whether the assumptions under which you CE mark the software are still correct. Is the intended purpose correct? Still, is the data that I have underlying as assumptions, is that still valid? Are there side effects that I didn't expect and that I need to course correct for? This is typically post-market clinical performance. Then, as a last slide, I would like to also mention that with the MDR and the IVDR, you are not there yet. So I've mentioned the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, very important when the software is processing data concerning health, which basically every software that is used for a specific patient will always be. E-privacy regulation is in the process. That is about software on devices, very important too. The Draft AI Act, the new AI regulation that's currently in the process, which will basically apply to almost every software in scope of the MDR and the IVDR. Why? Because it has a ridiculously wide definition of what constitutes AI. I think actually the definition is much wider than what people normally understand to be AI, like for example, deep learning applications and so on. But this regulation will apply to basically every software performing an action on data for the clinical benefit of a patient, which means the same as medical device software. The Draft Data Governance Act is very important because that is intended to give patients more control over their data. So, for example, it might give patients the right to take the data about their own virtual reality journey in a world and take it elsewhere, for example. Then all of this is functioning in the larger picture of a large European program, the European Health Data Space, which has all kinds of initiatives appended to it, but we don't have time for that, unfortunately. So thanks for your attention. If you want to go really in depth, I've written a 1,200-page book on the MDR and the IVDR, and everything should be in there more or less. I think it's time for questions now. So I'm going to move over one dot.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Erik, for this clear and presentation. There were some questions in the chat, so I'm going to ask them right away. There actually were two questions about hardware and the medical device regulation. Nice. Of course, we see all that. This is a nice Pico, and we have an Oculus Quest as well. But when becomes such a device a medical device? Or does it even become a medical device? How is that the combination between hardware and software? Is the integrity of the system? I believe Marco said one of these questions. Mm-hmm. Will it be a medical device as a whole, or how does that work?
Well, I am going to give you, as a start, a typical lawyer answer, and that is, it depends.
It depends. All
and
right.
What does it depend on? That's, of course, what the bad lawyers don't tell you. Uh-huh. It depends on intended purpose, and intended purpose is all about how you, because you as a manufacturer, you have the power about what is the device, how you define the device. Mm-hmm. And this is where I see companies also not always start with the end in mind. Mm-hmm. Because if I want this medical device, it's very easy. If I say this thing is for anesthetic, and I go like, bam, it's a medical device, right? So then I need to do risk management for all of this. But if I say the medical device is a VR software app that is used for rehabilitation, and it can be visualized in every off-the-shelf virtual reality glasses. Yeah. And I define some interface specifications, which basically defines every off-the-shelf virtual reality glasses. Then these glasses will not become a medical device.
Okay.
The medical device is still the software.
Okay.
So then as a manufacturer, of course, I have the obligation. If I say, for example, there's a special, the EMDR says, for example, if I claim compatibility with other hardware, I have to define compatibility specs in my technical documentation. So if I say my software is compatible with Pico, these and these versions, these and these firmware versions, Oculus, these versions, these and these firmware versions, done. And these are not medical devices.
Okay.
On the other hand, if I say, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have an Oculus, and then I'm going to mod it specifically. I'm going to flash my own firmware on it. And I'm also going to change the lenses because they don't meet the specifications for my specific applications. Then the hardware can also become a medical device.
Okay. But that, again, this is a lot of technical terms you're using. I'm just a simple guide, so I try to recapture this, and
Sure.
and if I correct me if I'm wrong. So if I work in a hospital, if I use an off-the-shelf headset, and I put only the specific software on it that helps our patients, then I should be good.
Yeah.
As long as I'm covered for the software.
As long as you don't
And
modify
I
the
don't,
general
I
purpose
don't, I
device.
don't modify the Pico or the Oculus. I wouldn't dare, because I'm probably gonna lose the lawsuit against Facebook.
Who knows? Maybe if you hire me, you won't.
All right, okay. But that's. But I don't want to go there, and no way in ever that Facebook will bring its headsets in as a medical device, because they simply won't, because it's a device for a much broader audience.
It's the same strategy that Apple had with their Apple Watches. They've really long basically said, well, you can do an electrocardiogram with our Apple Watch, but that's not what we're saying.
No.
Theoretically, you could do it until they finally had all the data. They went to the FDA, they had CE marked it, and then they suddenly said, oh yeah, now you have medical functionality that was always in there, and now you can do a one-point ECG with it.
All right. So but hardware, so it's pretty clear, and I think most of us are pretty. If we use off-the-shelf, let's say technology, we should be good, and we won't have to worry about the CE marking of that.
Correct.
But then what if the software is developed for, let's say, for a game? There's a question from Sophie, and she asked, what if a VR software is developed to help people with anxiety, but in a gamified setting? Does that fit under or fall under the medical device?
Definitely,
directive?
yeah. I mean, the slide I showed with the three applications of clinical benefits, also one of them actually claimed anxiety, not anxiety prevention, but rather anxiety alleviation. So, and again, this is another nice one of, is it for fun or is it for medical? And if you say, I make you play a game so I can alleviate your anxiety, then the intended purpose is not make you play a game in the end, because make you play a game is a means to the end of alleviating your anxiety. And since alleviating anxiety is a medical thing, it's treatment, so then it is a medical device.
But then we're on a slippery slope, because I also would argue, no, I'm let you play a game, and as a result of that game, you might feel a little bit more or a little bit less anxiety.
Yeah.
That occurs when people play this game,
That's a good argument, because what the authorities will look at is what is the primary intended purpose. So what do you claim that the device does? If you say, for example, if I play Call of Duty on my PS4, I get really excited.
Sure.
So that is a side effect. So let's say, for example,
that's so Call of Duty. I have two boys. I know this game. But it's a shooting game for people who don't know. But and it's
let's say you have a meditation app, for example.
No, but if I use that for the children's rehabilitation to activate children and to get them all excited and to make them do movements and so on and so forth, then I could claim, no, this is just these children like to play, let's say, a commercial game.
Yeah.
And the fact that they use their arms more and it's just, that's a positive side effect of the intended use playing the game. Or you could say, no, this is therapy.
Yes.
This is therapy. I'm training the children's arms, and I'm using the methodology of Call of Duty.
Exactly, and then you would need to look at what is the primary purpose that I claim. Is the primary purpose this is a game, or is the primary purpose this is a game to make people for rehabilitation?
But
For
there's a price tag to the position I take there. All right.
But it's a bit like, let's say, for example, we're in an orthopedic clinic here.
Sure.
So what kind of drills do you use for drilling in bones? Do you use the nice shiny stainless steel striker ones, or do you use Makita from the Gamma?
No,
because you can drill holes with both.
We can drill. No, we use let's say the medical approved ones.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the same with these games, and I know, by the way, what these medical approved ones cost. They're a lot more expensive than the ones. But why? Because they're designed for this.
That's designed for that, and of course, if we give people a new knee or a new hip, then in an operating theater, we can't say this is fun or this is that the intended use is pretty obvious.
And the problem is, I feel you when you say this approval process is expensive. That is definitely something I can appreciate, but that is a choice that we have made together as a society. By drafting a law that says basically all software needs to go through a third-party approval process, for which a third party can basically ask what they want, and that is a choice of the legislator. And you can say, "Hey, bad legislator, this is not a good choice. No. We want you to do this differently."
We're not here. We don't have any intention to change the laws, but I do have the intention to invite René Luijkens also to this table. René, you've been hearing the talk of Eric, and as a business developer, one of the questions for you was you shared already an example of an embedded game, which to me seemed a little bit like a good trick to avoid MDR regulations. Do you have another example of such a smart avoidance, or could you share it with the people in the audience?
Wow, not right now actually, because there are only a couple probably there are in the international there may be, but it's difficult. No, I'm not. Yeah, sorry, not really.
Not really. But could you share the example you gave? Could you send a link to the people so?
I intended to show a demo of that, but the movie was taking too long. So afterwards we can share that. Yeah, definitely.
So we share that movie of that and Eric, what do you think of this? The portal is probably already approved, and then you put let's say a device in the portal, and then it's also approved.
Well, if you use the word avoid, then I always challenge clients. Okay, so if you use the word avoid, then what is your game, right? It's a bit like if I'm driving too fast and I use Flitsmeister, the app that tells me where the radar cameras are, am I then acting legally and am I acting ethically?
All right.
It's a workaround. It's a workaround to not have to go through the processes that are designed to make sure that medical devices are properly controlled. So as a lawyer, I would say, and if you are going to go down the avoidance route, don't write it down. Don't write it down, because if the competent authority comes to audit and they find all these emails saying we have to avoid being caught in the MDR because we know we normally would be, that's a smoking gun.
So don't mention the word avoid, but use the trick. I'm sure you use Flitsmeister in your car.
Yes, definitely. But also, I would say, use it in a responsible way and make do the best you can in terms of argumentation. So again, for example, if you use general purpose hardware of which you don't want it to be a medical device, then have good argumentation why it's not a medical device.
Okay.
If you have software of which you think, no, this is really not a medical application, make sure you have good rationale, because it's always better to say sorry than to beg for forgiveness because you did nothing to
All right, but I think that's a good take-home message from your presentation. You gave us a way out, this Article 5, where you say, okay, what if you develop software in a clinic or maybe even in a research or in a university, and you test that out and it won't leave the university or the hospital, especially not on a commercial basis. But people who want to do research can go along with that and don't have to go through this this procedure of the MDR. So there's the shortcut to go along.
The only but there is that this is defined. This exemption concerns software that you use that you have developed in the clinic, and you use it in the clinic. So that's important to keep in mind.
And are you allowed to transfer to another hospital?
No.
Okay, so it's just in the house use.
Yeah. So and that's also a problem because, for example, I'm now working on a case which concerns a particular chatbot powered by AI that's going to help people address issues with a certain disease, certain group of diseases we see a lot in society. And what this chatbot will do is that it will learn about the specific population in which it's deployed. So then you get, and you have different health institutions with different populations in different parts of the country where some of these issues manifest a little bit differently. So we were working now on an argumentation where we say, okay, what we do is we do supply among these health institutions a particular, let's say, technology framework, which is then basically off the shelf for everybody, and then is produced, if you will, specifically trained on the local group in order to stay within the scope of that exemption. And a problem is as well, and that's I think a very important one, you need to be able to justify as of 2028, so that's still some way away, for IVDs, not for medical devices, so for general medical device applies already. You need rationale why you can't buy a commercial CE marked medical device for this.
All right.
But often the fact that the hospital develops it in the clinic shows that the particular patient population has a need for which there is no commercial solution.
Okay, well, it's a good addition. There were two questions, so I sneaked away to get them.
To look at questions.
One is about software updates. Software tends to be updated, and sometimes it's an incremental change, but sometimes it's let's say a major shift. How about, do we need to go through the process once again, or if one time if the 1.0 version is medically approved, is the 7.0 version then automatically also approved?
Well, again, it depends, because if you add additional functionality, then of course that needs to be looked at as well. And if you have a notified body, a third party that is responsible for the certification, and you add new functionality, they will also have to sign off on the new functionality. But if it's a software update, for example, for bug fixes, and it doesn't add new functionality, then it's fine. Then you don't need to go. And also you don't need to go through the whole process again, just through the incremental process for the new functionality.
Okay, well, thank you. Sylvia, were there any more questions? One more question. I'll go quickly look at this.
The example you mentioned, by the way, by in-house building is a little bit in conflict, which is the strategy of innovation. There was just an article in ICT and Health that it's one of the limitations of innovations. In-house design, but not applicable and scalable to other hospitals. So that is
that's a problem.
Okay. Well, we have two questions here. One is from, I have to move up a little bit. One is from Lane. It's about related to MDR for universities and research organization. Quality assurance is often difficult because there's no QMS or ISO certification. That's why we limit us to the phase of clinical investigation and will not put into the market as university. Which QA is needed in the phase of clinical investigation or investigational device?
Well, the good part is that for a clinical investigation device, you actually do not need a quality system at all, because the quality system standard is for production of medical devices. Once production of medical devices in series. And so if you're working on a clinical investigation device, typically that's not a series produced device yet. So you don't need a production quality system for it.
Okay.
You do need a quality system for the trial as such, but that's built into the legislation. And
You might have to go through the medical ethical committee.
of course,
Yeah.
because that's part of the ethics approval for the clinical investigation. And that's also important because because you've got several things you can do in the clinic. You can do clinical investigation. That's basically for an unfinished device. And you can do in-house production for a finished device, if you will.
Okay.
So there's still quite a lot of options that you have as a health institution.
Okay. There was an earlier question by Chris, and he asked you about the European Data Science Initiative. Could you elaborate a little bit more about that? Are financial compensation in place for EU startups who apply for MDR? And besides, what are your thoughts about delays in the notified bodies? So basically 3 questions.
I must say I'm not very familiar with the European Data Sciences Initiative because it doesn't.
But you showed one in your slides.
The European Data Space.
Yeah, that's.
No, that's a policy framework, and that will also include grants, for example, for.
But could we share a link to that initiative?
Yes, I can. I will make sure that you have a link to share.
Great.
Then the delays in notified bodies. I think that is a very important point because and there I think we are again looking at design of the law. I think it was a crucial and really stupid mistake of the legislator to first have the MDR enter into force, then wait for half a year, then start to accept applications for notified bodies under the MDR because every notified body had to be designated anew, and then take years and years for the designation of notified bodies. So now we have a problem that we are basically under-resourced notified body system, which is specifically a problem for startups that have to go through a notified body for the first time, also for a product which notified bodies didn't really have to evaluate that often, being software.
Okay.
So this is a real problem because basically, we're at a period where notified body capacity is scarce. So the only thing that I can recommend companies is basically start your engagement with notified bodies early, make sure, and don't start at the last moment. Plan for this process to take time, plan for the process to be difficult, so you need to contact more. And I mean, René also mentioned if you want to really do stuff, you need financing. And to go through a third-party certification process, it does take money. You have to make sure that you're also properly funded for that.
Yeah, but it can be during the design process. You may get advices from the notified bodies or advices which may help you to,
if you're lucky, because
to avoid mistakes.
No, but that's why I'm saying you have to make sure that you're on board with the notified body early, so you also know, for example, what they require in terms of technical documentation format, what they require in terms of, as I mentioned, development documentation. And this is different notified bodies sometimes have a bit different requirements. So it's really important to know that you do everything right from the start. So start early with it.
Okay. Gentlemen, we got 2 more questions and then we move to the last speaker.
Sure.
One question is, Clark says we are building a sixth sense for people who are blind. The system gives, for example, obstacle information. Would this then be a medical device?
Compensation for a handicap,
or a smart TomTom or a smart navigation system? So is being blind, is this an illness or
it's a handicap.
It's a handicap, yeah.
So it's literally in the definition of a medical device, compensation for an injury or handicap, medical device.
And even
so Clark, there you have it.
Even as a high risk, so it might even be class 3.
Yeah, if you say you can also use it in 3 dimensions to go upstairs, maybe to drive a car with it. You can port it into your Tesla and then have your Tesla be your eyes. That would be fantastic.
All right.
Nice interface.
But definitely a medical device.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And then there's a question from Naweed. And he said, is there a clear legal distinction between training purposes or medical purposes, even if the claim from the developer?
Yes.
So is there...
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to intended purpose. If the intended purpose is training, then it's training. And if the intended purpose is treatment, then it's treatment. So it's like the example that I gave with the surgical training software. If you use it for virtual training, like, for example, there's very nice VR software for training laparoscopy. And so if that software is used for training laparoscopies, then it is, training. But if I would connect it to a Da Vinci and then put an actual patient in there, of course, it's not training anymore.
Okay, that's not training anymore. Okay, so I hope that basically answered the questions. Thank you for all your questions, and I'm sure you have more, but we have to move on with the webinar. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for your contributions here. Okay, so we've spoken to a business developer and we've spoken to a lawyer. And again, questions can still be asked in the chat. And again, we will share everything we have through our website, vr4rehab.org, and also I will send you the PDFs of the presentation. But now let's go to an entrepreneur. Gentleman who is with this company, Cynthia, based in Europe. Reality in a lot of hospitals in several different countries. So I'm now going to give the floor to Robert Brouwer. But Robert is not here. He is somewhere in the virtual world. So we try to connect with him now, and we'll give the floor to Robert. Okay, there's no sound yet from Robert, so the technicians in the back are working very hard. We see Robert, but we cannot hear you, Robert. Robert, can you hear us? Robert can hear us, so we have to. So, well, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, that's happening. So I once again can tell you that I would cordially invite you all to come to our VR4Rehab Congress on the 23rd and the 24th of June this year. It will be on the podium if you send in your abstract, and if you do so before the 15th of March, the selection committee might approve you and you will be on the podium. Let's have a look at the technicians once again. Robert, you should have come to the studio in Nijmegen, and that would be much easier for all of us. I think we're going to call you via a mobile phone now. If you have one, then we're going to try to hook you up with your mobile phone.
Ja, nee, Arjan spreekt mee, maar dat is niet technisch. Heb je het nog gemute?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I do apologize for all this. We are working very hard to get Robert somehow connected. There's another question. Let's see if we have some more questions, and I can try to answer questions as we speak. Okay, there was a question of Ahmad Reza, if I speak that name correctly. If the concept of the software update, you said that if your software has new functionality, you must apply for the new. But if the intended use isn't changed and the document isn't changed, do you still have to go through that procedure?
I think we have contact with the
Robert. Okay.
I can answer
Let's answer that question, and then we go to Robert. So, So again, even though if the software is updated, do you still have to go through that process?
If it's for an update, then it depends on what the update does. If the update extends functionality, then this is the additional functionality needs to be looked at. So you might need to go back to the notified body and say, do you agree with me that my clinical evaluation sufficiently covers the additional functionality?
Okay, super.
And but if the notified body says no, this is not functionality that is of such high risk, or for example, no, we don't need to look at it, then you can just implement it.
Then you can implement it. Okay.
But you can also, I mean, if you fine-tune the relation with the notified body correctly, then you know also what kind of updates they would like to be informed about, what they would consider a substantial change, so to speak.
Okay. So, well, Eric, thank you very much for improvising with me here. We try to go back to Robert once again. Hopefully the technical issues are all solved. So once again, Robert Brouwer, he's one of the founders of SyncVR, Conquering Europe, with his, and I want to hear what's his take on the medical device regulation in his daily business. Robert, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks Remco. And I believe now we've solved the technical difficulties. It's great to be here, and super happy to share a bit of our view on the MDR. As Remco introduced, with SyncVR Medical, we have a complete extended reality platform for healthcare. And in that, we have roughly 30 extended reality apps specifically developed for healthcare. And in that, we've seen a lot of ourselves, but also our partners going through this process of first MDD and now the MDR. And if I see, okay, what would be my main takeaway from this is, in the end, it's all about your ambition. If your ambition is to really improve healthcare with your application, then there's no way around it. Then it is, of course, as Eric already said, it's the decision that we took all together to really have a high quality of healthcare, and in that, everything that we develop should follow those standards as well. And it's super important to indeed start with the end in mind, but do definitely start on it, because what we have seen is that there are many great studies that are currently running, which actually require this CE certification as a medical device as well. And in that, with high ambitions, and then sometimes you really need to invest in these kinds of developments. From our point of view, it's our recommendation. There's no way around this around the medical device regulations. There's definitely our approach would not be of avoiding it, but actually going for it. But of course, with a practical approach in that. So in our early days, we started as a class 1, still under the MDD. So that gave us, of course, a head start and a practical start in there. Where we also actually in the Netherlands, there were several ways where we got funding from, for example, Zonderday, or from several municipalities who actually supported us in going through this process. So that's a practical tip I would give every entrepreneur of looking at also maybe funding possibilities to help you in that. But along the way, we definitely saw, and we see that also with all the extended reality apps on our platform, that the ones that really get the furthest and set up the most interesting studies, and actually through that really make this impact in healthcare, are the ones that go through all the steps of regulations as well. And we always start small with a practical approach. As said, we started in class 1 as well, now moving towards class 2. But in that, we definitely see that with getting your solution approved as a CE approved, it really gives a competitive edge. and it allows for way more research possibilities as well, and actually studying and providing the clinical benefits of your application as well. That is the most concrete advice that we actually give everyone to actually start on this process. In that, we do also see that of all the documentation that we've developed ourselves as well, some things you really need to do. You need to develop and write down, even though you don't always follow the exact guidelines of your development project that you write down. So definitely take a practical approach in it. And secondly, as well, what really helped us in this, in starting with our CE certification, we really laid the fundament of making next steps as well for, after that, our NEN 7510, specifically regulation focused on data privacy in the Netherlands. But we also got our first ISO certificate focusing on processing of personal data, and actually making the first step with the MDR really made our company ready to next steps as well, and for other certifications like certain type of ISO certifications. So it is also a step-by-step approach that we took there, but in the end, not being a medical device will, on the longer term, really hinder you in terms of research possibilities that are there. So that's why that is, I think, the main reason to really start with it. If you really want to make an impact in healthcare, then unfortunately there is some regulation there in place that is sometimes frustrating as an entrepreneur, but it's there for a good reason as well. But secondly, as well, starting on this process really helps you as well to get ready for these other types of process, and it will over time become easier as well to get, for example, ISO certification, other types of certification that you need as well. So that would be our practical advice, and to start on it and take those steps and get good people around you who can give advice on how to approach it. Luckily, there's already way more available right now online as well, in terms of guidelines and handbooks that was there some years ago. So that definitely helps. But our recommendation, definitely go for this, because it's the only way to really support your ambitions of really improving healthcare through, in this case, virtual reality. With that, I want to leave it for now. Also looking at the time, and happy to answer any questions from people or from the other speakers.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert, for this clear presentation. I don't know if we can get both me and Robert in the same screen, maybe another challenge for the technicians. But I do have a question for you, Robert, and that is, you are currently growing as a growing entrepreneur in virtual reality, but you also must spend a lot of money in this process of medical device regulation and to notify the bodies and such and so on. How do you balance the let's say the investments in both the MDR trajectories and your business expansion? How do you do that as a businessman?
Yeah, so in that we really take a practical approach of, okay, what is really currently kind of like the bare minimum to get moving. So, for example, we're making a step to start first a project with diagnostics, actually using patient data. Before we get away from really diagnostic and patient data, so we could really grow with some more low-key use cases of virtual reality. That gave us a bit of a fundament and revenues and a broader customer base. And from that broader base, we've created the opportunity for ourselves to make next steps into more complex use cases. So it's kind of like an agile approach that we use there. We try first to really see the clinical benefits of it as well, and really see, okay, do we see a lot of business potential as well? First try to, with hospitals in a certain pilot setting, and try out things. But in that, then as a next step, also to look together to bigger grant and subsidy opportunities out there. We are in some development trajectories together with hospitals as well, where we apply to European funding, and there we're developing IP together as well, where there's also money in for example, CE certification. So that's the gradual approach that we take there.
And well, one of the questions earlier was the delay for instance, by notified bodies before you get approved. Has that ever stopped your business from growing, or do you recognize that problem at all?
Yeah, that problem is definitely there. So we reached out in an early stage to several of these notified bodies, also to get familiar with the process and be able to plan it into our long-term path. So in that, start with it, and the sooner the better in that. With, as Eric said, with the end in mind, and by starting it, and that's the same with everything. In the beginning, things seem super difficult and complex, but whenever you start with it and start working on it, it becomes easier as well.
Of course. So there's some learning maybe from both sides, both from you and from the notified body, to get this process going. As I mentioned earlier, I believe that you work in several different European countries. Is there a different, let's say, approach towards the device directives in different countries? Do you see clear difference between, for instance, Germany or Denmark or the Netherlands or Belgium or all around where you are?
So of course the MDR is a European regulation, so that in general you actually see the same. You see the same in the different countries. What we do see is that in different countries there are, unfortunately not in all countries, but there are processes in place to make the step towards reimbursable care. Like, for example, in Germany you have the DGAT trajectory. In Belgium you have the MHealth validation pyramid. And there, being CE certified, the CE certified medical device is one of the prerequisites in it as well. And yeah, of course, it is an investment. But if in the end, if you successfully enter the DIGA or the MHealth validation pyramid, for example, you are into reimbursable care, and then yeah, and that is really the major step that you want to make as a VR company as well. And I think we are in those trajectories, and I think that's what we'll start with. It's also the question about ambition. If that's really your ambition of make a step towards reimbursable care, that you can only do that if you have a super and really effective and proven solution. And then yeah, you also need to make the step to follow all the medical device regulations. Because in the end, yeah, that's the same with top sport. If you want to win an Olympic medal, you cannot get there without training a shitload for years and years and years, and investments are needed to get results.
Yeah. So there you would say a medical device regulation approval is a qualifier basically to be in the game.
Yeah, and of course there are many things indeed, as Eric pointed out as well. So with this new type of legislation, you always notice that you think, okay, I understand it, but why didn't we do this or why didn't we do that? And it's the same with the DIGA or the MHealth pyramid. There's many recommendations that we as entrepreneurs give to that, how we could have made it more efficient. But in the end, it's what we want is not as many digital or VR apps in healthcare. No, we really want to improve healthcare through virtual reality, and that's some things will drop out because they're not good enough, and that's also actually that's just a very natural process.
There's a question from the audience from Yeti, and Yeti has a question for you, Robert. Do you also have experience with the world famous FDA approval? And is there is the United States, is that more interesting environment to launch and to go along than Europe. Can you say a little bit about that? Have you ever considered going across the pond?
So we don't have any experience with the FDA. It's of course clear that that you just have one language for such a big region and one set of regulations, that it's in that way easier to follow and comprehend. Of course, through that, competition is more fierce. For us, our focus is for now really on Europe and not on the states yet. I would definitely say if the competitive landscape is open for your solution, definitely go for it. But then, getting a foot on the ground in the States, then kind of like the funding that you need is also highly significant. Probably tenfolds of what an MDR notification would cost you in terms of conquering such a market. So I don't think anyone who wants to move into the US would probably be afraid of getting certified following the MDR regulations.
Okay. Well, thank you, Robert, very much for your clear take-home messages and your clear visions on how to use MDR. And I think it's very good that countries like Germany and Belgium basically say, hey, if you want to be in our market, you have to have your stuff in order, and MDR approval is one of those. And once you do it, we get reimbursement for you. So that's the only way to get started.
Yeah.
Well, so once again, thank you, Robert. Hopefully we'll meet you in real life next time. But for now, this was perfectly, and thank you so much. If you want to see more of Robert or of virtual reality, we hope you will join our conference on the 23rd or 24th of June, or visit us at the Health Valley event. The Health Valley event will be on the 16th and 17th of March this year in the Netherlands, and we will host a VR experience lounge. And you can see a lot of different VR applications and try them out for yourself. But for now, I would like to thank all of you for the good discussions you had. I hope you had a nice afternoon with us in the St. Martin's studio, talking about the Medical Device Directive. Sylvia, my colleague, said that she will do anything to send you all the details and the presentations tomorrow via email, and hopefully early next week we will do the video of this webinar will be posted on vr4rehab.org. So stay tuned, and hope to see you all pretty soon, virtually or in real life. For now, from the St. Martin's Clinic studio, thank you very much and have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.